Welcome to Marketing MASH, brought to you by themarketingscope.com.
Welcome to the Marketing MASH, put on to you by The Marketing Scope. I'm Eric Vidal, Editor and Chief Content Officer. With me, I have Daniel Newman, contributing writer, as well as CEO or co-CEO of Broad Suite Media. Did I get that right, Daniel? I know that.
And all the time we're talking, you still don't have my resume right. I'm going to need you to read off and tell everybody about my books, everywhere I write. I happen to do the bald thing better than you.
My apologies.
On air. We'll get through this together, though, buddy. We'll get through this together because today we have a good show, and I'm excited to do just you and I, because normally when it's Shelly and fans and you and I get picked on a lot, and then when I don't show up, you get picked on a lot.
I get picked on all the time. Doesn't matter what the show is, and when the fans will talk so fast, I can try to jump in, and then
he's inspired, so just know that. But today, I think we want to jump in and talk a little bit about the ever-changing landscape of webinars, because right now, for demand gen, lead gen marketers, or actually just for anyone that's really got a marketing responsibility in their business, leads are all the rage. Everybody's talking about how do we use marketing to create leads. So, over the last few years, there's been this evolution of digital, programmatic, but also social. And so many businesses have started investing money into content marketing, social media marketing. They're using digital platforms, paid ads, paid social, and they're running into this problem that they're spending all this money, but so much of it's kind of falling into this bucket of waste. They are spending money that they can't really attribute to. So now the pressures that are coming from the tops, from the CMOs, which you're having that upcoming CMO summit at the Marketing Scope, which is super cool, is to actually create leads. And for a long time, webinars have been the leads, and that's been your thing. So I thought maybe, we could kick it off. You could talk a little bit about what's going on in the webinar space now.
Yeah. Well, let me jump back 1 second. We talk about leads. Let's talk more about the funnel. And this is my graphic, since we don't have graphics on Blab, about the funnel. And it's about leads, but it's also about opportunities, taking those leads through the pipeline, right? So it goes to opportunities, it goes to appointments, it goes to the pipeline, right? So marketers taking an active role, working hand in hand with their sales counterparts or their sales team to build a pipeline and actually try to close revenue. And if you think about it, you look at the marketing mix and all the different programs that you can do to fill up that funnel, webinars usually ranks right up there in the top. It's because it's a lot different than, say, a email blast and email blasts are good, by the way, or even an online campaign that you're going to do on a site. You get 3 or 4 or 5 seconds of their time in an online campaign. Email blast, you may get 30 seconds. Ebook is great. They may download it and engage with it for a minute or 2 or maybe 10. But, with a webinar, you're getting someone's attention for 20, 40, 60 minutes, right?
All right, so
that's where the value is. Hey, there he is. Brian.
I want to give a little shout out, though, and I know because it's a Blab, this is real time, and I want to appreciate all the people that started to sit in, but the power of the Blab bomb. Now, it's a small group coming on over right now, but I was just on. I stepped in over to Fans' chat with Ted Rubin right before we went on here, and we talk about power of moving community. So I went in there, we were talking about customer experience, and I was strategically requesting that I would come in, say hi, give a little bit of 2 cents of knowledge. And at the end, I go, don't forget to tell everybody about our Blab coming up, our Marketing MASH. And Brian, being the savvy marketer he is like, I've already got the link queued up. I'm going to bomb everybody. So while we might not get some of the, the feel-good crew, the hardcore marketers in that room, the ones that are interested in lead gen and content marketing, I think we got a few of them that just came over. So thanks a lot, fans, for bringing them over. I know you've got some things going this afternoon.
No, yeah, of course. No, and I want to jump in because I love, I told you I wanted to watch the recordings. I think, webinars, I think, are an interesting piece. I think webinars, very much like email marketing, is from the new age marketer, the new age sales team, underestimate the power and the validity of those platforms and really what they can do. But I also think it's a changing of what you're using them for, right? I think it was almost like a dumping ground of soaking a lot of people's time. So I know you guys are going to talk a lot of different stuff on here, but I think there are so many people doing so many different great ways of leveraging this. And I think even now, knowing that we have Blabs and stuff, it's like, okay, now what is that taking from a webinar, and now what can we add into a webinar that's currently not available, maybe in a public open forum that we can add additional value to different things. So I'm excited to hear you guys kind of drill in this a little more. And if this guy next to me is coming in, it's going to be an awesome show. I know that for sure. Because
if he can get on, he's a little bit, he doesn't know that you got to use Chrome. He's too busy actually selling stuff.
Yeah, Jack, above your on the browser, it says allow camera and allow microphone. A little pop-up pops up. You just have to hit allow on both of those, Jack, and it'll get you in.
I think he's having internet issues. He's so just so you guys know, he's
Arizona.
He's in Arizona, and he stopped by my house, and we had a quick meeting, and we did a video earlier, an archive video, and so he wanted to jump in. He had some strong ideas and wanted to give his thoughts on this topic. He's having trouble logging in. So
what is this archive video? It wasn't live streamed. No, I'm just kidding.
I know.
It's funny, Brian, because right before you came on the air, what I said is the biggest problem is, Mark Schaefer had his whole content shock thing that's gone pretty viral globally. I said, but we're kind of in webinar shock now too, because it was like in the last couple of years, businesses discovered webinars are good for lead gen. So now what's happening is every company on the planet is doing webinars, but a lot like blog posts and a lot like social, it's been so watered down. So what's ended up happening now, it's like the first webinar you're being invited to is like a hardcore product demo. And so people are blasting their list, come learn all about our new product demo. Like they're not really appreciating what the funnel is. They're not really appreciating that at the top of the funnel, it's all about utility, about education, adding value, building a relationship with people. And this isn't soft marketing. This isn't like soft return on hugs bullshit that everybody gets mad about. And I know return on, I'm not dissing anything with Ted or anything. I'm just saying like it's not that. It's really about, you have to build some level of trust with people first. These are the Gary V jabs. These are the Jay Bear utility, is doing something that people actually would want to learn about, whether it's from your company or any other company on the planet. That's how you become and how you build advocacy or community, is that people go, oh, these guys actually care about helping me learn more about, like in Jack's case, his whole thing about marketing automation. It's like Jack builds a relationship with you. You won't know till the 6th, 8th, 10th time you talk to him that he wants to sell you something. Right. I mean, it's funny because I talked to him for a little while on the phone. I started asking him questions about buying Acton because I'm interested in. And he's like, I don't want to talk. He was like pushing me away. Mr. Closer himself. He's like, we'll get to that later. Right. Let's first get to understand you. So I think that's one of the big things I wanted to kind of cover today. And you, Eric, being the expert in the space of webinars, is how do brands that want to do these things stop making them a nuisance? And, this is like email of 10 years ago. I said a meme the other day. This will be my last thought because I'm talking fast like fans already. is there was a meme that was like, remember when you used to get an email and you were excited about it? It was like, you got mail. And you'd like, oh my God, I've got mail. I want to go check it. And then your mailbox outside was full of crap all the time. And you didn't ever want to get your mail. Now I'm excited to go to my mailbox because I get more important stuff in the actual physical mail now than I get in my inbox. And, it's talking about, so webinars have become that way too. I see 500 a day on different social channels. And you know how many I sign up for is like 2 a year.
Well, because the crazy part about that a little bit is that, the live streaming thing for me has caused like a little bit of like a video buzz on people wanting me to come in. And I've been trying to get better at saying no, as my 2015 goal is saying no to free stuff all the time. And so I had, between a week ago, so let's say in the last 2 weeks, I had 11 requests to be a guest on the webinar for these 11 different brands. And so I decided, as they kind of build up, and everybody knows I'm bad at replying to emails, so they definitely build up. I decided, you know what, I'm going to send each one of them an email and like ask them, what's your target audience? What's your goal of your webinar? What does success look like to you? And ultimately, why did you ask me, right? I just asked those same 4 questions. I put it in the same, I didn't reply all, like there wasn't one email, but I copied pasted that same 4 thing into each one of them. I did it on Tuesday of this week. So far, one of them has even replied. And I tell you what, the one that replied is one that I will actually end up socially promoting, because they came back and said, well, actually, the person that selected you, I think, was just looking at your clout score. And now that we've kind of looked into like who you are and what you're about, we're really focusing on a market that is a small business that is in healthcare and financial. I don't think that's your piece. We knew you were tech, but we are sorry for wasting your time. We're going to keep you in mind for another one. And I told him, I was like, that honesty in like the webinar space, where I felt like I was ready to get a reply back from every one of them saying, well, we're going to give you a couple leads. We're going to amplify your message, expose you to a new audience. So I think that's an interesting play. And I think I'm going to jump off because I do have to run. But I would love to hear if you guys can get to the point where what can webinar software become that it does not become, like the idea where even the best webinar software is kind of like the Google Hangouts world, where you're almost looking for something else, because even Webinar Jam and a lot of this technology, when it doesn't make video easy and it doesn't make social collaboration easy, those things I think are part of the barriers to entry. But I don't think it, without question, I've come full circle in the idea that I can not only see value in webinars, but I look at that now as a captured audience to build a relationship with, not a captured audience to sell when you happen to reach them in there. So I see Jack just might jump back in, but hopefully he jumps in because he'll be able to add a little bit more passion, talk as fast, and probably more value, because that's just kind of how he rolls. But cheers, my bald friends. Happy Halloween. Have a good one.
Brian, thank you so much.
Or just imagine though, Eric, just imagine if you could actually do a webinar that was experienced somewhat like this. Thanks for sharing your auto webcam there, buddy. Just imagine if like there was a gate right here and you go through the gate and this was the webinar. Imagine if the webinar was this interactive and this engaging. Now there's got to be a content sharing element, but I actually think that people's faces and people talking is probably more engaging to me than having, a bunch of slides. Like I've realized lately, like when I've been at all these different digital and these marketing events, when you just have slides and people talking, I actually think if you could almost eliminate the slides, some of the best keynotes I've seen use almost no slides, or if they have slides, they're almost 100% imagery.
Yeah. I mean, what I'd like to see, at least for the marketing scope, I'd like to see us, take in 2016, kind of learn from some of these live video streams, right? Some of the things we do with Blab, and kind of maybe come halfway and meet somewhere in the middle. Because one of the things that I've done over the years with webinars is, and it's hard because I work with a lot of companies and they just, hey, he made it.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Dude, you need to hear it, man. We're going to have to talk.
Well, I have my kids and my neighbors, or everyone's streaming, their Netflix, the whole bit. So our apologies.
In the same house.
We're at the same
together?
Place.
Yeah, dude, you should see Vidal's crib, man. He must be making those big dimes.
Everybody's hanging up.
Hey, so going back to what I was saying is, and by the way, I mean, I'm going to age myself here, but I've been doing webinars since I think it was December 99 was my first webinar, and it was a long time ago. And so I've done a lot wrong, and I've done some well. And so hopefully I can share some of that. And by the way, Jack, we were talking about you for quite some time, so there's a lot of high expectations here for you. But let's go back to let's start from the beginning. Brian brought up some interesting points about how he asked some of these companies about their target audience. What are their goals? What are they, all the way down the list. And that's the challenge when no one has a webinar, or very few people have a webinar strategy or goals, or create this webinar machine where, okay, every other month we're going to do this, and they have it set up and prepped. One of the biggest challenges, I've worked with large Fortune 100 companies, I've worked with small startups on this down the line. Obviously, you guys know I worked at WebEx, and so I helped work with a lot of companies and their webinar strategies back 10 years ago. And it's what Brian said, but it's even more than that. They don't even have a plan put together. And the other biggest challenge they have is they're not conversational. They dump a bunch of PowerPoint slides in there, and they don't know what the topic or even the description is. And they don't even have a speaker set half the time until about 15 days out, maybe 20. So there's not a lot of prep and planning. And it kind of goes back, and Jack, we were talking about it today, right? Your content marketing strategy, and the webinar piece has got to be part of that. It's also got to be part of the lead gen strategy, and not a lot of people are giving it enough thought ahead of time. Those are some of the big things that I see all the time. I saw it back in 2002, 3, 4, 5. I see it still now. Sometimes we even have that challenge, but I'll just kind of set that up, and then we'll talk about some of the challenges from the inside the webinar, right, Dan? Making it more interactive, right? Like you said, these are really great because you got the windows and the things. Some people just sit and they talk about the slides 45 minutes, and at the end, Q&A. You should be taking Q&A all throughout. You should be doing something every 2 to 3 minutes. You should be doing something.
I did a webinar not that long ago, won't say with who for what, but I wanted to do interactive and I was absolutely shut down. I was moderating. It was like, oh, I was so frustrated because I felt like such an opportunity got mixed. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let Jack jump into 1 second, but I want to add.
By the way, I remember that because you called me the next day and you were
I lost my hair all over that. My goatee fell out and I looked clean shaven like Jack, just less hair. Let me say something really quickly, and then Jack, I'd like to let you have the stage because I'm afraid I'll never get it back. But you
might be right.
The bottom line is this: we've entered the age of ad hoc content, right? So like here we are on a show, we had a topic, we got on, we just kind of start talking, and these shows in ad hoc can be really great. But when it comes to a webinar, when it comes to something where you want to get a result, move someone from not knowing who you are to being aware, from being aware of you to being interested in learning more, from being interested in learning more to wanting to demo to wanting to buy, right? You've got an idea in a funnel. You can't just show up without a plan. And I'm feeling like brands have said they don't even really care about the content. So this is about webinars and content marketing. They care about the registrations. How many regs did we get? We got 400 people. We're going to put a garbage webinar on now. But we got 400 signups. So then we're going to hit you up through our email marketing, our marketing automation. We're going to bombard you because you signed up. But the actual experience, right? The customer experience of working within our webinar, going to be absolute. We're going to give you garbage.
These people are going to give you 30 minutes or 45 minutes of their time, and you're not giving value.
Yes.
So one of the things that I've done over the years is, with the different companies that I'll do a webinar with, the ones that will take that input, right, Dan? Not the ones that say, no, we got it. Thank you. We're going to talk for 45 minutes and then do Q&A only. We have 37 slides. It's creating a kind of a list. These are 10 things that you should do, or maybe more, but it's an agenda for the webinar to follow. Introduction, 2 minutes. Then do a poll or a survey for the next 2 minutes. Opening 2 slides, to talk about, the topic from a macro level, show some examples, take a question right away. You should be taking Q&A questions at least every 4 to 5 minutes, but you should be doing something every 2 to 3 minutes at least. Because, back at WebEx, I'll go back to my WebEx days, we used to track and analyze all the different activities. When you did a webinar that was 45 minutes of slides and 15 minutes of Q&A, you lost a lot of people. We used to have this, we had a lot of things in the back end that could track that. It was frustrating to see all that. But it was good to see when the clients were doing it right, because it kept people engaged. Also the satisfaction levels in the surveys afterwards, the amount of people that moved up the pipe. It's funny how that was increased when you had a good webinar. But Jack, Dan and I set it up. Well, from a sales perspective, how do you see this?
So I think a lot of companies and brands have killed the webinar. I think it needs to be revived. And I'll say for one reason, because I can't tell you how many endless webinars I've wasted my time because the content sucked, right? Like, if you're going to do a webinar, you better come with so much value that I don't care if you ask from me questions. Like, I don't care. I don't have to be engaged with you, but your content better be worth my 20 or 30 minutes. Right? Because if I go to a brand's webinar and it doesn't catch my attention, I'm automatically associating, them not adding value to wasting my time. And that's a negative thing for me, right? It's very strategic with webinars because you can do 2 things. You can build an audience or you can lose it. Yeah. Right?
No,
and that's totally all based around the content.
And Jack, your audio is a little bit hitting in and out. So I want to make sure that we give you a chance to revive yourself. But you do make a great point, is like I said, is the lead gen and the reg page, I think, has become the focus, Jack. I think it's been all about how many people signed up, how much information did you get into your marketing funnel, how big did you build your list, and who can you bombard afterwards? Who can you get into your sales cycle? And I think that there's only, who are a company, and Eric, obviously the Marketing Scope does great events. It's your company though. But who are some other companies, and Jack, other than Acton, other than the Marketing Scope, who have you been on a webinar where you've been like, wow, this is really good. I'm really glad I gave 30 or 45 minutes of my time.
Here's one I'll throw out. So
Insight Pool. Insight Pool has the best They crush
Inside
webinars.
So
They crush
I'll give you two examples. I'll give you a small company and a large company. And In Expo is a small company that I've been on 2 of their webinars, and one of them we did together, so I'm a little prejudiced. But the gal who did it, she went through that that kind of that list that I talked about. She obviously had that list. I even talked to her beforehand. She said, I do the same thing. And she was just right on, very engaging. She only shared a handful of visuals. She shared one slide that had stats, maybe 2 or 3 visuals, and it was all her talking, took questions all throughout. She was wonderful. I mean, it was just very engaging. Another larger company that does them, I've seen some, they've done that, they're poor, but there's more good ones than bad. And that's IBM. Just some quick stats. IBM has, they've put on some of the largest virtual events in the world, where they've had people from
so why do you think they have such great success?
I think because I know what they do on the back end. It goes back to the beginning of what I said. They have an online event strategy and plan, and they actually have a centralized team that works with all the different departments or divisions that wants to put that on. So they're constantly sharing those best practices. They're teaching somebody who's never done a webinar, or someone who's very raw maybe, or novice. They're teaching them their best practices, and they're sharing a guide. Kind of, we do the same thing, but it's hard to tell a sponsor, you can't do it this way. At IBM, they're a little tougher, right? You have to do it this way. And they have a list. These are the things you need to do before the event. This is a list of what we recommend to do during, and this is what we recommend after. Yeah. Please try to follow as best as possible.
One thing I'll say though is their production is out of this world. And what I mean by that is I've actually been the guest on a number of IBM webinars, and there's meetings ahead of time. There's content planning. There's collaboration ahead. You know what the content is. You've dry run it. It's a lot like when you're speaking at a big event, and the day before you dry run the event, and everybody goes up and they give their little spiel, and you time it, and you make sure that the room's going to be rocked. And that's a big problem. And Jacob Curtis mentioned that about it's like a TV production. They take it seriously. And that's, I guess, what I mean is, like, a lot of people are taking webinars like they think of a Blab or a Periscope, of it as being an ad hoc content experience. And the point is, social and live streaming are ad hoc. Webinars need to be well thought out. You need to think about, where are we engaging the audience? Are we going to have video? Are we not? And don't take that for granted, because people like to look you face to face when possible. If the platform allows the speaker to be face to face, hidden behind a microphone with slides is about as bad as sitting in school. It really is. So unless somebody really, really is excited about your content, it's not a good strategy.
Well,
I'll tell you a couple
facts. Let me give you a couple facts though, real fast. Just let me set this. Let's go back a second. So in most research reports or marketing media company reports, we've put one out as well. Marketing Prof, B2B marketer, blah blah blah. Webinars are usually ranked in the top 5, sometimes the top 3 most effective marketing tools that B2B marketers say they use.
For lead gen.
For lead gen. And so that's a fact. And it's been around like that for 3, 4, 5 years. And you brought it up earlier, Daniel, that a lot of people are figuring that out. Hey, we got to use it. The challenge though is another fact is people don't come in organized, right? The other fact is it's hard for a B2B marketing company to get speakers, to get the right content, and figure out the strategy behind it as well. Those are just some of the facts that are out there. The other fact is, as we all know, we're being bombarded. Your audience is being bombarded with content, more ebooks, more blog posts, more articles, and guess what else? More webinars. So it's harder to cut through now to that clutter. So, you not only have to be good at the content delivery, you have to be good at the content promotion, how you position it and promote it. And I hate bad headlines.
Is this any different than any marketing? I mean, that's what you have to do with all marketing, right? Like, webinars are no different.
True, but you know what? You get away with it a little bit more when you do an online campaign or a bad email blast. It's out, it's gone, it's forgotten. Why don't we just do 30 days promoting?
Start doing everything right. Like, start thinking through everything you do, right? Like, I mean, I think that's the problem. Like, you take your webinars super serious, because you're going to be in front of an audience, and it's going to be, relating to your brand personally, right? Like I would take an offense to a crappy webinar from a personal brand perspective, right? Like I want to make sure I'm adding value because not only am I hurting my brand, but I'm hurting myself, right?
Yeah.
Like people need to take this stuff personal.
It's funny because Jack, people will go in front of 100 or 200 live people on a webinar with no plan and they'll bomb. But what I'm saying is you would never do a 100-person corporate sales speaking event and not plan your deck and just walk up there. And while I do understand that maybe being on a webinar is not the same as being on stage, maybe the ratings and the surveys aren't going to be as poignant. In today's digital always on world, getting on and just completely ignoring the fact that you have 100 people listening and watching your webinar and you're going to just show up unprepared, it blows my mind. And you're right. There's really no reason not to be prepared. There's no reason to have a webinar where you don't plan the content, you don't have production, you don't have a plan, and you don't want to make sure that somehow the people are going to walk away knowing that you added value. That could be through surveys, through the questions you ask them. The digital tools, right, Eric? It allows you to do that in real time. Are you finding this valuable? What questions do you have?
Yeah. Hey, welcome, Jacob.
And how much of the content is it? The content what you want your audience to hear, or is it what they want to hear? Right. That's where I think the missing gap is. Companies want to go on and they want a self-serving message because they think it's effective still.
So from a macro level, I'll give you two of the biggest problems from a macro level that companies don't pay enough time or attention on. One is it's the promoting. In a large company I won't name, but I remember they put on a webinar and they had great speakers, but they had more people on the back end on their staff. They had 4 or 5 people from the company, and they only had 2 people join, and because they forgot to promote it. They just figured if I build it, they will come. So one of the things that I see most of the time is promotion. The other one is, and this almost so often, it's after the event. Whether they do a webinar or an online event, it's after the event. It's done. They throw the mic down and they're done. I'm tired. I spent so much time doing that, and they're done. And if you do it right, you can promote that webinar on and on and on, and you can keep that long tail, the content, the conversation going on. And those are the 2 biggest things that I see companies, not paying enough attention to. There's a lot of smaller things we talked about earlier, like PowerPoints. The other one is dry runs. I've been on so many webinars where some big time executives, I don't need to do a dry run. And then they show up and it's a bomb, or they don't even know how to use the platform. So they're trying to move their slide and they're pushing the wrong button. And then they turn themselves off and they go off and, blah, blah, blah. Right. So those are some things that I wanted to highlight as well.
Cool,
so
guys.
Jacob,
could I just toss in a comment here?
Yeah, please.
Excellent. So, hey, Daniel, how's it going? Happy Halloween, everybody.
Surfer dude.
So I produced television in college throughout the 4 years I was there. And a lot of this translates through to the whole production side of it, what you're talking about with the pre-production, production, and then post-production, right? And kind of, we would call it a run sheet in the industry where it's, okay, intro slate, intro host welcome, intro of the topic. And I run a Blab show too that I just started with Anna Hendricks. And we have everything very scripted out. And I find that not only in an efficiency standpoint, but you're also kind of keeping it on track and providing that content. For example, right? Like,
Jacob, let me jump in there real fast. You get pushback from people for having that run sheet, because I think that's wonderful and it makes so much sense. But I know some people they don't want to be that organized because they think that it'll come across beautiful if they just wing it.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing with those that can maybe go up and ad lib, but still stay on topic and on point. I do it more so just for sanity purposes and also for my co-host to follow along. But it's also just to put some method to the mayhem, right? And when you're talking about production or webinars or any sort of production, when it's recurring and you're doing it over and over again, it's almost the same template through. If you have essentially a run sheet, you can then follow that to a T. So, and I think that just puts much more quality on production. So, for example, when I'm doing my Blab show, I have transitions and such. So, for example, this was from yesterday's. We were talking about preparing for a social media hire. So I have a program here that actually throws these in throughout the live show that people can then follow along. So even if you're joining in after the fact, you can still do that. And we'll do things like put in articles that we found and stuff. And I just think adding that production value and showing people that, hey, I'm taking this serious enough to do that due diligence, pre-production. Yeah, nice. it kind of benefits. But the question I have here before I jump off is, you talked about moderating and kind of holding Q&A throughout the show. And one thing I'm through a webinar, but I feel this translates in Blab shows as well too. What's your tips for moderating the Q&A? For example, I'm kind of having a difficult time when people get on and they just start going off, and then you got to tie them back down and loop it back around to the topic, and then kind of not be rude and bounce them off if they're not staying on topic. So maybe a question I had for you is what are some tips that you guys have as far as hosting a webinar or hosting a show like this where you're moderating commentary?
I'll start that one. I'll take that one, and guys, please jump in. But I think it's a lot harder to do with Blab because you have 4 people and there's the video and you don't want to interrupt. You know what I mean? It's hard. It's like a girl from Nebraska trying to jump into a double Dutch game in Brooklyn. It's very hard. But anyway, when I'm moderating a webinar, it's a little easier, but it's still tough. And one of the tricks that I'll give is I always try to ask a question early. I'll bring it up to everyone. Hey, ask Q&A, da-da-da-da. But if I haven't got a question within first 5-6 minutes, I'll go ahead and I have a seed question. So, hey, Jacob, Elizabeth just asked, and there's no Elizabeth, but I just asked that. And then it's funny. Every time I ask a question, a seed question, within 2 minutes, I've got 3, 4, 5 of them come up.
Now, are those already written down before the show as far as a pre-production standpoint where hey, okay, well, if I don't have, I got a bag of questions I can always throw from?
I usually have 2 at least.
That's
maybe
awesome.
3, but I usually have 2. And so now you guys know if Elizabeth is fake. But
now we know. Well, before I jump off here, I'll keep watching, but I'll open it up for somebody else if they want to jump in. One thing that I found is also very beneficial for some webinars I've attended, specifically Simply Measures, for example, is they do very good at having a community manager follow up on Twitter or during the conversation where they're actually one thing I'll do, and this is just from what I'll do, is I'll take screenshots of the slides of the webinar, put a little quote to it, and then post that out with a hashtag that the webinar might be surrounded around. And then when you have that active community manager in tandem with the person who's presenting, I don't know, I just really like that aspect. And then to the point of following up, that's also a great way for them to follow up after. But I got my puppy here. He's going nuts, but I want to jump in. Good seeing you, Daniel. Yeah. Nice to meet you, Eric and Jack.
Jacob, thanks so much. That was great input. I love the run sheet.
I want to comment on that. I mean, I think for webinars, I couldn't tell you how much sense that makes. I think for these kinds of shows, I like the idea of having an outline, but I do get a little bit concerned about the idea of a completely programmed show, because part of what makes Blab and Periscope and live streaming things so powerful is the interaction with the community. So like I'm over here on the side, talking to Patricia, talking to Misty, I was talking to Jacob early on. And sometimes they say things that are actually really, really good content to kind of feed and fuel the show. And I think part of that real-time marketing of an event like this is that people want to be involved. I think when you get them involved, they stick around longer. When people feel like fans and I, we do Smack Talk here and we do Cloud Talk here. Smack Talk's a podcast. So we'll get on and be like, guys, we're recording. We're not going to be interacting with you guys on the, in your comments. And our attendance is like 50% to 25% of what Cloud Talk is, where during Cloud Talk, we're constantly pulling from the messaging. We're bringing people in and out of the show. We're engaging them. And I think that's something we got to think about is I think scripting, having a plan, having content is important, but I also think you have to think about your medium. If your medium is webinar, then I'm all for it. If your medium is live streaming, then people might see that as scripted as like, well, that's great. I can watch this later.
But those are
two. I think those are two different strategies, right? That's two different channels. I mean,
And I said, I don't know if I'd like a Blab that felt real scripted. I like kind of
But you know what? I can't talk for Jacob, but I think what he's doing is it's more of a guide. And even a lot of the webinars I would only script out sometimes the first 7 minutes and then maybe the last 3. But that middle part is really, it's going back to the content, taking questions from the audience every couple minutes, just like what you were saying, right? You were saying there was conversations going on. You were getting points from somebody on the chat, and then you're bringing them in, right?
So let me ask you this question, Eric. So I think yesterday I watched a really good webinar. It was like one of the best I've seen in a long time. It was by Tell Wise with Mike Weinberg. And one of the reasons that I thought it was so engaging or so, why it kept me listening, they did PowerPoint slides, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like but the two moderators, Mike Weinberg and I can't think of the guy's name who was running it, but they flowed so well together, right? That I felt like I didn't need them to engage with me, right? Because they were engaging with each other in such
They were
a
probably
real-time
posing
conversation
questions.
that was so
They were probably
natural.
posing questions too that they already knew that that are frequently asked questions maybe as well, right?
Well, and the content was so good, right? Like they were like focusing on stuff that I needed probably help on, or it made me better in my career. And I think that there's so many times LinkedIn is terrible at this. Like I've watched LinkedIn webinars, and you get on there, and it's like these three people that are on it, these three thought leaders, quote unquote, have never met each other, right? Or they've never flowed with each other, and they're all trying to fight for space. And there's no if there's no natural flow,
Yeah,
I'm out, right? Like I
No,
feel like
you-
it's unorganized.
you bring-
So I really feel that the people drive the value through the coercion as well. That's
You bring up a great point. And we didn't bring that up, and that is a great point. You need to have that energy. Dan and I, and we don't want to name companies, but we had this conversation, and we were talking about webinars that we moderated or hosted where we didn't have it. And I know he had one recently, and it wasn't there. So, and a lot of it is because you don't know each other sometimes, or never met, or you got on the phone at least a week before, or did a dry run. That's why those things help. But if you know the person, like you literally, like I used to do back in 2000, 12, 13, I used to do these webinars for the company I worked with. And there was this young guy about 29, and he was a product manager, and we knew each other. We traveled on business. We had beers together. We talked about family stuff. We knew each other. So when we got on, and we knew when it was like Latin dancing, right? It was we could finish each other's just everything. We knew we
okay, this is getting weird. All right, let's
tangoing and we knew
double
the
dutch.
guys.
I'm getting ready for the Halloween party, man. Tomorrow.
Yeah. So hear me out here. I mean, I've found this to be emphatically true, Jack. You may have made the point of the show, and I hate to give you credit because you and your return on hugs and all the stuff that you're all about.
Wait,
I found
my return on live streaming.
I talk about the Cloud Talk show, and that show's done extremely well. We've monetized it, brought great sponsors onto that show. And what is it all about? Brian and I developed a great on-air chemistry where we basically know each other. We can riff off of each other. We don't have to plan a lot of our content, but we know how we're going to engage and how we're going to act. The audience feeds on that. I've done some of these blabs and hangouts, and I've come on the air, and the moderator is awkward, or the two people. And what I'm saying,
he's in his basement in his boxers.
Right, but they're just awkward. They don't engage well. They're not exciting. They're very monotonic. They're boring. Like everybody thinks that because live streaming webinars, because Blab is out there, that they can be a star. Not everybody's meant to be a star. And where my point was going with what you're saying, Jack, is companies that want to do webinars cannot underestimate the value of having the talent that does the webinars be awesome. Having awesome moderators. I cannot tell you how many times the difference between a good webinar and a bad webinar, content aside, is that you had a moderator that could keep it moving. You had a moderator that could move between the experts, one that could take someone's very boring response and make it more interesting, and then engage someone else into the conversation or bring the audience in. Because I've seen so many webinars that just have shitty moderators. And I think it's because the company just appoints somebody, and you know what? They'd be better off finding a professional, pay them $500 or $1,000 to do the moderation and make it not suck. Because if you get one sale from the webinar, it would have probably been worth the investment. But now what you had is 25 people that signed up, 10 that showed up, and 9 that are pissed off because they lost 30 minutes of their life that they're never going to get back. That's the only thing they're going to say. They're going to go to lunch today, and they're going to say it to the person they're sitting across from and be like, I sat in on Joe Coe's webinar today, and that thing sucked. The moderator was an idiot. The content was terrible. And you know what? Even if their product is the best, I won't buy it just purely out of resentment that they let me sit on that 30-minute horrible webinar.
Yeah.
Well,
I think live streaming is, live streaming to me, it's very rare where I ever get on and see anybody adding any value, right? Like, it's plain and simple. People talk about the same thing, but webinars are completely different. Like, a webinar to me is so important for your brand, because if you can master and nail the art of a webinar, people will crave your next one, right? And if you can get people to crave your content, that is a deadly weapon, right? For Insight Pool, like I'll tell you guys right now, like I can't wait for their next webinar, right? Like when I see they have a webinar, not only am I the advocate for that and I promote the crap out of it, but I love their content. They're the only ones that have me like that. So you can do some powerful
Jack, are you guys partners with them?
Is that a joke?
Yeah. I don't want you in trouble.
No, we're not. But I might be, If this partnership with Marketing Scope doesn't work out,
Hey, speaking of making webinars and Blab's very concise, we're past the 30-minute mark, so maybe we should wrap this up, guys. Any last comments, Jack?
No, I think it was a lot of fun.
Man, thanks for having me on. Your webinars count. They drive revenue. Webinars drive revenue.
No, Jack, that's great. I didn't mean to talk over you. Your webinar. Here's another suggestion as we wrap up the hour is when you're hanging out with the person you're going to co-moderate with, try the internet out before you jump on to make sure that the webinar could work better. Because, planning is sort of a key in this business. Yesterday we were doing Cloud Talk. Fanzo was driving all over Vegas to try to find a hot spot. So he's coming in and out. He's on his mobile. He's on his device. He's on his computer. Couldn't get Wi-Fi. And I'm sitting here by myself on Blab with like 60 people sitting in the room, talking to them, making up questions. I'm like, now we're riffing. That's terrible. There is you cannot underestimate the value of that too, is actually planning for your technology, planning to be somewhere where you're wired in, planning to actually have a Wi-Fi, a good video, a good microphone setup. I know Marty McPadden's out there, and Marty works with us at V3V a lot, and he's constantly harping on us about good microphones, good video, because he worked at ESPN. You cannot underestimate the value of planning your webinar. So I would say this: if I was walking away, it's what we really, to summate the show today, it's getting back to good content and actually focusing on not just the red, but the delivery. It's planning your content. It's planning the show. It's having a good moderator or good guests that can actually speak. They're not just technically inclined, but they tell good stories and they're interesting. And then test everything out before you get on. Because the last 3 or 4 Blabs I've done, and Jack, no offense, today, the last time I tried to get you on a Blab, it was a disaster. We got to get there a little bit earlier because, webinar, even more so than this, where people are a little bit accepting of it. If you get on a webinar and you can't connect, people can't hear you, people can't see you, they're like, oh my God, this company's not professional at all. And I think that's a big knock. That's not a knock you really want in this day and age.
Hey, I'm blaming it on Eric's internet. So if I was at home, that would happen.
True.
I know everybody's got to go. So thanks for having me, Eric.
No, great. Listen, guys, and that was a good wrap up, Dan. We'll end it right there. So thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. And have a happy Halloween, everyone. Thanks, Marty, Ross, Jacob, joining in. Appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of Marketing Mash. You can share your thoughts by following us on Twitter and Facebook. Subscribe to our podcast to keep up with the show. And of course, you can always find us by visiting themarketingscope.com.